Hello, today we're going to take a look at whether humanity is a product of natural evolution or some sort of extraterrestrial intervention. I'm Russ Brinegar, the author of Overlords of the Singularity, the Manipulation of Humankind by Hidden UFO Intelligences and the Quest for Transcendence, available on Amazon.com. So there's the question, were modern humans engineered by an extraterrestrial intelligence? And if so, for what purpose? We have to go back 4.5 billion years when the Earth was just forming. It was highly volcanic and was bombarded for millions of years with asteroids and comets and was a lifeless volcanic rock. Then suddenly, late in the game, only 500 million years ago, out of the 4.5 billion, the Cambrian explosion happened, which suddenly appeared about 36 different phyla. Now, astrophysicist Dr. Ron Joseph says that these 36 phyla contain the DNA in them for all future evolutionary forms. This is Francis Crick, the discoverer of the DNA molecule, and Francis Crick stated that DNA is a technology, that this couldn't possibly have just arranged itself from a primordial soup. And he believed in something called panspermia, in which life was seeded on this planet by an extraterrestrial intelligence. By coincidence, a channeler named Maria Orsic back in the 1930s in Germany, one of her channeling sessions indicated that 500 million years ago, which is the exact same date as the Cambrian explosion, a colony from Aldebaran came to Earth. So who knows if that's coincidence. But then there was millions of years of diapsids. Giant carnivorous reptiles dominated this planet for most of the time life has been on the planet, until about very recently, 65 million years ago. It's thought that the dinosaurs were extincted by a 5-mile wide asteroid impact off the Yucatan Peninsula. This is an artist's depiction of a humanoid dinosaur. If some species of dinosaur, like the big brain Troodon, pictured here, had continued its evolution. There's a Zulu shaman named Credo Mutwa that claims to have had an encounter with a cryptid reptilian. Mac Tonnies wrote a book called Crypto-Terrestrials that indicated we might have some non-human species somewhere underneath the Earth. But 2 to 5 million years ago, the only thing remotely human that was running around that we know of was a species called Australopithecine. And it's just a little tiny monkey looking creature with an orange sized brain. And from the holes in the skulls that have been found, their main purpose was cat food for the big saber-toothed tigers. Something happened 1.8 million years ago. The Australopithecines actually became a much taller, a much bigger brain creature called Homo erectus. Now, Homo erectus wandered the earth in clans with not very much effect on the environment, and they only had one piece of technology, which was a biface axe. And there's debates on whether they threw this axe into herds of animals and they were carnivorous, or if they just used them to carve wood or build huts. The late Lloyd Pye came up with his intervention theory. Now, intervention theory simply states that instead of the hand of God guiding evolution, instead of Mother Nature herself guiding evolution, that they did it. So who are they? Now, after 1.8 million years of wandering around the planet, about 2 to 300,000 years ago, Homo erectus was transformed into Homo sapiens. Now, this is the era that Orientalist Zacharias Sitchin, who translated Sumerian cuneiform, talks about the Sumerian mythology of the Anunnaki, which is thought to be an extraterrestrial species that lives on a planet called Nibiru with a 3,600-year elliptical orbit. Dr. Arthur David Horn, also who taught at Colorado State for 14 years, quit teaching biological evolution and wrote his book, Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins, ET Influences on Humankind's Biological and Cultural Evolution. At some point, the ends of the chromosomes on chromosome number 2, called the telomeres, were fused, and the overlapping code was expertly deleted. So about 75,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had another upgrade into Homo sapiens sapiens, or Cro-Magnon. And by coincidence, 75,000 years is a period. It's thought that a supervolcano in Indonesia extincted the human race down to as little as 40 individuals or 2,000 individuals. So we almost got wiped out. This 75,000 year period is also coincidental to a body of material called the Raw Contact, the teaching of the Law of One, who states through the channel of Carla Ruckert in 1981 that humanoids from Mars were brought to Earth. Now, this sounds a little bit strange, but there's a Dr. Ellis Silver who wrote Humans Are Not from Earth, that explained all the reasons why the modern model of Homo sapiens sapiens couldn't possibly be indigenous to Earth. It looks like, due to recent archaeological excavations, that prior to 12,920 years ago, from 12,000 to 50,000 years ago, there was a globally interconnected megalithic civilization with aerial capability. We know this from the Piri-Reis maps, that Antarctica was mapped from the air accurately before the last ice age, when it was tropical. So the primitive species of Homo sapiens sapiens, who most people are taught in grade school, they were just fruit-eating clans of hunter-gatherers, couldn't possibly have constructed a globally interconnected megalithic civilization. So it's thought that a more advanced population with these types of capabilities possibly coexisted with the primitives. There are some researchers who speculate that this was Homo capensis, the tall skulls like the ones they're finding in Paracas, where they have a different suture structure. Now, some people think that these were cradle boarded, but they found infants in the womb, and there's anatomical abnormalities that indicate that this was not the same species as Homo sapiens sapiens. Now, what happened to the globally interconnected megalithic civilization is thought to have been wiped out 12,920 years ago by what researchers like Graham Hancock called the Younger Dryas impact event of 12,920 years ago. And there's sites like Göbekli Tepe and Baalbek and Pumapunku that indicate that at some point what they were building or what existed just got completely wiped out. It's thought that a fragmented comet flooded and scorched the Earth. Now, this event, the Younger Dryas impact event, is thought to be the actual origin, and this is confirmed by the Greenland ice cores that found nanodiamonds and iridium at that date, of all the world's flood myths. Noah is usually dated in Bible books as 4,400 years ago. And it's not even remotely possible that a global flood happened 4,400 years ago and that a single family repopulated the earth to produce all of the current ethnicities on the planet. The story of Noah is actually taken from the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story about Untapishtim in Sumer. It's the exact same story, only precedes the Noah tale 1,700 years. And both of these tales that exist in the Bible and the Sumerian cuneiform are thought to have originated from this racial memory of an actual event that happened 12,920 years ago. Also, 13,000 years ago, roughly, is when the advanced civilization of Atlantis is thought to have gone down. There was another continent that's speculated to have existed called Lemuria in the Pacific Ocean. Researcher James Churchward actually researched all the temples in the South Pacific for decades, and he's written several books about his conclusions that Lemuria was an actual continent in the South Pacific that went down from exploded gas belts about 50,000 years ago. And some of the survivors of Lemuria came the early Native Americans and Atlantis. So about 6,000 years ago, we've got these strange petroglyphs that exist all over the world. These are referred to as the Apkallu sages, who apparently wandered the planet and taught the primitives the rudimentary elements of civilization. And there's speculation into what their wristwatches were and what was in the bags that they carried. Ivan T. Sanderson, a zoologist, stated, "I think the Earth is a farm and we are the product." And Charles Fort, the inspiration for the Fortean Society, stated, "I think the Earth is property. The Earth is owned by someone, all others warned off." Researcher William Bromley wrote The Gods of Eden, and he started out trying to find the underlying causes of war. And to his shock, he concluded that there's two factions of extraterrestrials that interact with the human race. One he called the Maverick race, which has an interest in human spiritual and technological development. And the other is the custodial race, who are manipulating humankind into their own purposes. So the extraterrestrials that are believed to be benevolent seem to look like us, the Nordics or the humanoid extraterrestrials. And because they may actually be related to us, they've taken an interest in a more primitive version of themselves. Whereas the custodial race are thought to be certain factions of the Greys, the Mantis race, or the Reptilians. Some speculate that these beings are from the constellation of Orion. So what would they be doing here? If you look back into recent human history, it's very bloody, very brutal, very reptilian, very territorial. Men in particular have had a sword put in their hands from day one, and any element of empathy was beat out of them. And we've been spilling our insides on battlefields for thousands of years. So what would be the underlying purpose if this was a genetic manipulation by an extraterrestrial race who's using or employing humanity for their own purposes? One thing that's expedited by all this war and territoriality and conflict is technology. So we started out with sticks and stones and swords and shields and went into trebuchets and catapults. Some of the first biological attacks were catapulting dead bodies over the threshold of castles and fortresses and walls to spread disease. It went into modern armaments. In 1945, the monkeys were playing with the matches, and we set off our first atomic explosion in July of 1945. Now, when this happened, this is where the flying saucer phenomenon comes into visible focus all around the world. There's many flying saucer crashes reports. 1942, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. 1948, Aztec, New Mexico. 1953, Kingman. There's actually about 75. I had a chance before he passed away to speak with Sergeant Clifford Stone, who worked with Operation Moondust and Blue Fly on crash retrievals. And I was pretty much convinced that these events actually happened. There's Philip Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell, and he became bitter in the end because of all the criticism he got from writing this book, and stated that the public just doesn't even deserve to know the truth. And that attitude indicates to me that he was telling the truth. That's how I would feel. Ryan S. Wood, with a foreword by Jim Marrs, wrote Majestic Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. And the strange thing about all of these alleged flying saucer crashes is that the technology that's gleaned from the crash sites is just a little bit beyond what our current scientists can understand. So you have to ask yourself the question, what are the chances of somebody coming from another star system crashing and providing technology that humans could even decipher or use. So my take on this is that it's a staged event by another layer of the intelligences behind the UFO phenomenon, and they're guiding us into a premature technological singularity. Robert Solis wrote a book, Fated Giant, that tells about the 1967 Maelstrom incident, and where a UFO showed up at a nuclear facility and shut down the capabilities of Minuteman missiles. He also wrote another book, Unidentified, and explained how these intervention events have happened all over the world, about 12 of them. In comes David Jacobs, an abduction researcher. Starting in 1961, we had the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, and the reports of abductions became global and widespread. There's thousands of them from 1961 through the late 80s, even to the present day. And Dr. David Jacobs is convinced that this is a hybridization experiment in conjunction with the cattle mutilation. Bovine blood is actually used in vitro fertilization. So there was a program involving the alien abductions and cattle mutilations, tissue harvesting events, that was actually a hybridization program, and he speculates that the hybrids are now walking among us. And you hear today about crystal children and indigo children, children that are being born that have higher IQs and special abilities. Another data point is the mass contact event that occurred from 1956 to 1967 in Italy. Engineer Stefano Brescia self-published a book, Mass Contacts, that told all about it. This is a photograph of one of the alleged humanoid extraterrestrials that the Amicizia, they were referred to as the Amicizia or the Acridge or Acri, some people pronounce it. Timothy Good, author, he talks about the Amicizia quite a bit. But optical physicists have looked at this photograph and determined that this being is about 12 foot tall. And there's also a 1:9 ratio between the head and the body, when human is 1:7. Pictures and videos of their craft from the Amicizia exist. This is one of them. Here's another one. Now, these have been examined in optical labs and determined to be real objects about 30 feet in diameter. So what the humanoid extraterrestrials told the over 200 contactees in Italy is that they were part of a galactic federation and had an interest in the development of humankind. Another data point is Standeo, ex-Illuminati insider, was made aware of 2 different species working in underground bases, a gray alien type who were a type of artificial intelligence, an AI, keep that in mind, and a group that could pass for human. Command Sergeant Major Robert Dean, also one of the alien species that the US military is aware of, could pass for human. Now, the strange thing is that the humanoid extraterrestrials that seem to take an interest in the current model of humanity and possibly the hybridized version of humanity coexist with the other faction of extraterrestrials that are manipulating humans for their own purposes. They don't seem to have a direct conflict with one another, but operate by proxy here among the human population. The Acridge, the W56 group, or the Friendship Group, or the Amicizia, warned us of an invading group. They were referred to as the CTRs, or the Contraries, or the Wiros. Now, that's not weirdos, it's Wiros. And that means to have been built. And this is a runaway artificial superintelligence from the Orion star system that poses a threat to humanity. So, what are they doing here? To answer that, we might want to reflect on the work of a man named John von Neumann. He was an early AI researcher, and he stated that the most likely intelligence that we will find in the solar system or beyond is artificial intelligence, and that one of their goals might be to self-replicate. So if there is alien AIs out there who seek out planets to self-replicate, either using the resources on the planet or employing the dominant tool-making species to construct a replication platform for them, that might be what's going on. Now, I.J. Good in 1965 talked about the intelligence explosion, the machine intelligence explosion, that machines ultimately will do everything better than humans. And then the technological singularity term was picked up in 1992, I believe, by a science fiction writer, Werner Vinge, and then picked up and used by Ray Kurzweil. Now, Ray Kurzweil is a futurist that's hoping to stay alive long enough to upload his brain into a computer or upload his consciousness into a computer through a process of whole brain emulation. And he defines the technological singularity as a singular period in time beginning around the year 2045, after which the pace of technological change will irreversibly transform human life. There are the techno-utopians that think this high-tech world is a good thing. Robot entrepreneur Rodney Brooks and Ray Kurzweil present a techno-utopian view of the singularity. And then there's others that are giving warnings. Yuval Noah Harari. Now, his husband prompted him to write books, and his first book, Sapiens, was quite good. So when he came out with Homo Deus, I read that. Now, he's sort of being demonized by certain political factions on Earth in league with Klaus Schwab and as part of the global takeover. But I read both of Yuval's books, and he's just telling it like it is. When he makes statements like humans are hackable animals, and once artificial superintelligence is here, humans will serve no more useful purpose. He's just stating the existential threat that a lot of futurists and AI researchers are conceding to. James Barrett wrote Our Final Invention, Artificial Intelligence and the End of the Human Era. Right now, we can see that machines and AI are taking over more and more human jobs. So at the point where AI and machines can do everything that humans currently do for a living, what will happen to the human race? Some have a very positive outlook on this, that we'll be in a globally unified, moneyless society and collectively own all means of production of goods and services. They'll just be like a public library. You just material goods, you just use it and turn it back in for recycle. And then others think that there'll be an elite population that are the technocrats and that they'll get rid of everybody else through a depopulation program. So the transhumanism is a big debatable topic. This is the belief or theory that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. Through this technology that's soon to be invented, the blind will see, the crippled will walk. There'll be a lot of very positive aspects to this. The state of humanoid or human level robots is at hand. They're actually more advanced than most people realize. Some of these robots you can actually have a conversation with, and if you close your eyes, you'd think he was talking to another human being. One of the techno-utopians is Alex Vikolov. He wrote an excellent book called The Scintillate Hypothesis. Now, his take on the future is that it's mankind's destiny to merge with machines to achieve something he calls the apotheosis of the omega point, where we become like a planetary collective mind as what he calls a scintillate. The physical universe is a chrysalis universe, and that will open a portal into the realm of other planetary scintillates in some sort of new realm of existence as artilects or scintillates. The late Jim Marrs, in his book Alien Agenda, said something that really struck me. He says, somebody out there is trying to recreate their super science. Researcher Alana Freeland wrote Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown, and she makes the case that the aluminum, the barium, and the nanoparticulates from the chemtrails are already in human bodies. There's a lot of speculation as to what the chemicals are for. Possibly the Navy needed over the horizon 3D radar. They need to electrify the atmosphere for scalar weapons, but there's evidence of some sort of program going on, which has spawned diseases like Morgellons, where they're pulling nanofibers and strange lesions out of people. Author Lynn Kasten wrote Alien World Order, thinks the reptilians are behind it all. for a planetary lockdown. They're claiming the planet as a possession. Now, it seems that the humans on the planet who are really into domination and territoriality and conflict and ally themselves with militarism are the ones that will actually be involved in the planetary lockdown, which is kind of ironic. You might wind up with these guys on a possessed planet under surveillance down to the DNA level as a slave race of some sort, whereas the upper half of humanity, or whatever percentage it is, the meditators, the reverent people that see the world as sacred and live their lives that way, may actually be involved in a better timeline. Many in the truther community are looking for the solar flash, in which there's going to be some sort of dimensional shift. And this is reminiscent of the Christian mythology of the rapture, where some people disappear or transform and others are left behind. The 5D Earth is what these folks are looking for, the meditators, the positive people. So we have an interesting future in which the timelines might be bifurcating in some way. One timeline is headed towards a dystopian future in a planetary lockdown situation, and the other timeline is a transformation into a 5D Earth and a Type 1 civilization on a peaceful, military-less, moneyless, globally interconnected world. So my book is Overlords of the Singularity, the Manipulation of Humankind by Hidden UFO Intelligences and the Quest for Transcendence. And I appreciate your time and courtesy for listening.